Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today, for the first time in so long, is actually Q&A day. Most of you who have been around for a while know that I love to do these Q&As where I get to interact with you guys and give you shout outs on videos and answer your questions. Every couple of months, usually maybe 2-3 times a year, I tend to do this. One of the main reasons I'm doing today's Q&A is because several months ago, maybe 5-6 months ago, I put a call out for a Q&A and asked you guys to ask me questions, and I got a bunch of responses, and it's the first time since I started doing this channel that I didn't have a chance to actually get to that Q&A and answer your guys' questions, and I feel so terrible about that. And so now, here I am on the other side of my kind of, health scare situation from a month ago, and I felt like it was a good time to come back and actually fulfill the promise of that Q&A. So, I did put another call out on Twitter just a couple of days ago for you guys to ask me questions. I got a ton of responses, as I tend to do, so I picked, I think, 10 questions out of all of those responses that I wanted to answer today and give you guys shout-outs and just discuss a bunch of fun gaming and Nintendo-related stuff. And so with that, we're going to jump into this. Of course, don't forget that if you want to be a part of these Q&As and other things like this in the future, then you should definitely follow me on Twitter, where I am super active. Every day I'm tweeting and talking and discussing and joking and sharing stuff about my life and talking about updates about gaming news and all sorts of different things. It's a lot of fun, and so if you're not following me on Twitter, you definitely should be doing that. So today's first question on Twitter comes from Mighty Ryan at Mighty Ryan1337. What is up, buddy? I've seen you on many Q&As in the past. Thanks for asking a question. And here is what he asks me. He says, do you think a version of Gamepass could make its way to Switch, and would you personally be interested in something like that? So this conversation and this theory from people has been going around for a while. I want to say maybe close to 2 years at this point. If Game Pass, specifically Microsoft's Game Pass, would show up on the Nintendo Switch or a Nintendo platform, or if Nintendo maybe wants to start moving in that direction and adopt a similar sort of strategy. So the way I see this, that's basically two different ideas, and therefore it's two different questions, which means I have two different answers for it. As far as Microsoft's version of Game Pass coming to the Switch, like a lot of people have thought about or predicted or asked for, honestly, you guys, I just don't see that happening. I've never really believed in that concept. Even though we know Microsoft has been a lot more open to working with Nintendo, and they've allowed a couple of Microsoft-published games to exist on the Switch and Nintendo platforms, beyond just Minecraft, which is on everything under the sun, the two Ori games and Cuphead are the main games that come to mind. And as well as Banjo-Kazooie being allowed in Super Smash Bros. And so, yeah, Microsoft and Nintendo have a pretty decent relationship, but Game Pass, that service being allowed on the Switch, I mean, that is such a can of worms being opened, because then it's like, okay, does the version of Game Pass on the Switch mean it's allowing Nintendo and Switch games to be available, or is it this weird open back door of the Switch's overall infrastructure into Microsoft's backend to allow Xbox games to be played on the Switch? It's just messy. Not to mention, I think it hurts Microsoft's branding. Microsoft's branding of Game Pass available only on Xbox platforms and on PCs is so smart, it is so lucrative for them, they're doing so well, that allowing it on the direct competition, as much as Microsoft might be friendly with Nintendo, or even if they want to be friendly with Sony, I don't really think it actually helps the Xbox or the Game Pass brand. So, not to mention, I don't even know if Nintendo would like the idea. So, those are just all the reasons why Microsoft's Game Pass on the Switch, I just don't believe in it. Now, the other question, like I said, is would Nintendo create their own service? We're seeing Sony start to realize that Game Pass is a powerful and popular idea. It's doing very well for Microsoft, and it is really doing well for the Xbox brand. And Sony is trying to adopt a similar but different strategy where they're giving away more free games than they normally would, and they're talking about all this different exclusivity with like prior gen games on the PSN network, not to mention there's already PSN Plus, and so they're probably going to try to strengthen that aspect of their service. And so, would Nintendo ever do something like this? My answer would be maybe, and if so, I think it's at least one generation down the road, if not many, many, many years. I don't see them offering anything like that right now on the Switch, in the Switch era. I think that Nintendo would need to warm up to the idea, and I think that for them to build in that infrastructure and see the monetary value is going to take them years. So maybe in the next generation they dabble in it, but more than that, I think it would be the generation after the next generation that they might start it. So we're talking like, gosh, what, 2030? Maybe 2028, 27, 30? I mean, a while. I really think it would be a while. So it's hard for me to say it's a hard no for Nintendo, but it certainly ain't happening on the Switch. That's my theory. Next question comes from VG Mobster, at VG Mobster. What is up, buddy? Thanks so much for asking a question, man. I certainly appreciate you. And he says, hope you're feeling better, Rule of Two Review. Rob, I wanted to ask you what games you think would benefit the most from a performance boost on the Super Switch. Yes, that name, not the Switch Pro. Good question. Obviously, this is the relevant topic. This is the zeitgeist thing that everyone is talking about and curious about, and myself included. Are we getting new Switch hardware? If so, how much of a boost is it? Is it a small jump like a new Nintendo 3DS? Or is it a huge jump that might be more like a next-gen jump, which you guys know I've discussed that possibility. Only a possibility. I haven't said it's a lock. It's just a possibility I've put out there. And so what Switch games would benefit from the performance boost? If we're looking at the new Nintendo 3DS kind of thing, where it's just a small boost in power that makes some games look and run better, I think that the main games that would get actually a benefit from a performance boost or a slightly upgraded Switch Pro kind of thing is honestly, it's third-party games for the most part. There's a couple of first-party titles, obviously, like, it would be nice to see Breath of the Wild maybe be in 4K, or Mario Odyssey be in 4K, maybe fix some of the frame rate issues in some sections of Breath of the Wild. That stuff would certainly be very cool. But outside of that, I really think it just comes down to third-party games and third-party devs. Because, as we know, Nintendo works magic on their console. Not only do they get incredible, amazing visuals that in many cases can sometimes rival the current generation consoles from the competitors, PlayStation and Xbox, but they also get great frame rates out of it. You know, they're one of the only companies making their games like in 1080 with incredible graphics, many times at 60 frames per second. Again, Breath of the Wild notwithstanding. Third-party games, it's a different story, because we see games that are maybe multi-plats on the Switch that are in a lower resolution and or a lower frame rate. So I think of games like Dark Souls Remastered, I think of games like Mortal Kombat 11, I think of games like Bethesda's games like Doom and Doom Eternal and Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus. All of these games that, to me, overall look and run very well on the Switch, and I own many of them, and I think they're fantastic. But imagine if they could actually be in 1080. And imagine if they could actually be in 60 frames per second like they're supposed to be. To be fair, Mortal Kombat 11, I believe, is 60 frames per second when fighting. All of the cinematics and the intros and even the crypt, that stuff is not 60 frames per second. But the performance of the fights is buttery smooth. And it's why that game is very impressive to me. But still, that game could use a performance boost. Heck, I even think of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Think of that game. An amazing game that has significant performance problems. Those are the games, the non-Nintendo first-party games, that I think would get the biggest advantage out of a performance boost of some sort of small Switch Pro type of upgrade. Next question comes from Yorch at Foo Hazard on Twitter. And Yorch asks me, if none of Breath of the Wild 2, Metroid, Bayonetta, or 3D Mario are out this holiday, what do you think could be Nintendo holiday games besides Pokemon Pearl Diamond remakes? That's actually a really good question. I think that it's worth considering that. You know, we expect Bayonetta and Breath of the Wild 2 to release this year. Rumors about Mario, are they going to come out over the holiday? Obviously, I think a Metroid game is very likely this year. But what if none of those happen? What would Nintendo's big holiday games be this year? Well, there's a couple of things we have to consider. One is there's still a lot of time for Nintendo to announce new big games that we don't even know that they're technically being made. Whatever that could actually be, we don't know. Heck, we now have E3 coming and Nintendo's a part of it, so they might reveal some stuff there. So there's a lot of opportunity for Nintendo to surprise us with new titles that could fill the gap of these games during the holiday. As far as ideas that come to my mind, You rule out a 3D Mario game, but I will say, even though I've been kind of 50-50 or 60-40 on this, Mario Kart 9 is not a crazy idea. I do think there is a chance that a Mario Kart 9 could be a big game to release this holiday. There's also rumors about some sort of new Fire Emblem game being made right now. Maybe they're remakes of the Wii and GameCube games. Maybe it's a brand new game. That's entirely possible. I don't know if a Fire Emblem game really becomes like the big hot holiday title, but it would be a big title. Does it cover a holiday, or carry a holiday, I should say? Tough to say, but it's an option that I think is worth throwing out there. One of the only other things that jumps to my mind would be some sort of big Nintendo third-party crossover kind of thing. Similar to how, if you guys think about it, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity really was the holiday title last year, even though it was a weird year because of the pandemic. It was a third-party developed, first-party IP Nintendo kind of crossover thing that was a huge title. It was very good. It was very successful. It effectively carried their holiday. And so what if they do something else like that? Like, let's say like a Kingdom Hearts cross Nintendo thing. Like, what if they had some sort of huge, well-known IP that crossed over with Nintendo or Nintendo developed or something like that? I could see something like that. Or like an exclusive Final Fantasy game. Something big, high profile that would be only on the Switch, crossed over with a third-party developer or a third-party IP, something like that. Those are the kinds of things that I think could fill the gap without one of these games. Next question comes from a good buddy of mine, RetroDeath, at RetroDeath on Twitter. What is up, my man? Thanks so much for asking a question, buddy. You guys should definitely check out his channel. He does have a gaming channel that he runs on YouTube. And he says, tell me a game you absolutely love that you never really talk about. So this was hard, man, because there is a huge list of games that I love and adore that almost never come up like on the channel or when I'm on Twitter or anything. And so I kind of quickly looked through my collection and I just picked two games that I wanted to focus on real quick. One is this absolute gem, this bad boy, Zombie U on the Wii U. I adore this game. It is so underrated. I think they delivered so much on the promise on the Wii U as a console and on the gamepad. This was a game we were playing at launch when the Wii U and the gamepad was a new exciting idea before, you know, it became a failure and some people didn't like it. But to me, this game is fantastic. I love the atmosphere. I love the graphics. I love the gameplay. I love the gamepad support. I don't know. Zombie U is an underrated gem to me, so I love that game. The other one, we're going a little bit older, SSX 3. This game, you guys, might be in my top 10 all-time video games. I love this game. I spent so much time on this back in the day in the 6th gen, obviously here on my GameCube. I love the SSX franchise, mostly the older games, the first 3 games. It kind of went a little bit weird with SSX Blur, and then like the 2011 remake or 2013, whenever that last one came out. I didn't love those games, but SSX 3 is just, when you get good at that game, it is like euphoric. It is transcendent to go down that mountain and pull off those tricks and the uber tricks and rack up scores and go real fast. And there's so much character and personality to the different riders you can select and the customization. It is a masterpiece. So those are two games that I absolutely love that really never come up on this channel. Next question comes from Steven at StevenTV on Twitter. And he asks me, hi Rob, so cool you're getting better. Thank you so much. Do you think games are getting easier and changing the video games from a challenging hobby to a more passive hobby like movies or TV? Love your videos. Watching from Chile. Well, hello. All the way out in Chile. I appreciate you big time. Good question. Is the video game sort of hobby and industry and culture becoming more of a passive hobby, something like movies or TV where people are just watching? Do I think they're maybe getting easier, kind of like the way that you asked your question here? I think that what I would say is, on the whole, no. I don't think games are necessarily getting easier, and I don't think that they're becoming more passive. And I think you ask that because of like really heavily cinematic games like Last of Us or Detroit Become Human and Until Dawn. You know, games that usually show up on Sony's consoles. Maybe that's what you're getting at there. Or you could be getting at the fact that maybe you think some games are so easy that it's less about sinking into the experience and more about just, without focusing, you've got a controller in your hand and you're just kind of zoning through it. I don't think that's happening, but what I do think that's happening, that kind of lends to your question here, is the video game industry is just always growing. it's insane how much bigger it is now in 2021 than it was 10 or 11 years ago in 2010. And then go back a decade even before that. And it's crazy the jumps that this industry has made. Not in terms of technology, just in terms of size, in terms of the amount of money that it generates. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's bigger than the movie industry, which is crazy when you actually think about that. And with that comes new players, comes new genres, comes new business models like free-to-play games and microtransaction games and mobile games and all the stuff that a lot of us probably don't like. And so what we're seeing is as the industry grows and more opportunities for different kinds of gamers, both hardcore and casual, start to become possible, we see maybe more passive or easier game experiences, things like a lot of the mobile games that show up and things like that, or, you know, really what I think are bad free-to-play games, things like, you know, Fortnite and other stuff like that. You know, that whole side of gaming, as that gets bigger, those kind of people in games like you're talking about in your question, that side grows. But on the flip side, the side that we're all a part of, the more core experiences, the people who are dialed in, playing really difficult, challenging, well-crafted, artistic games like your Zeldas and your Dark Souls and your Last of Us's and your God of War, you know, that whole thing. I'm naming AAA kind of games, and even a lot of the indie games, that is also growing. And so what I think we're seeing is just the industry expanding. And so you've got the stuff you're talking about here is getting bigger for sure. But this side is also getting bigger, the ones that we're a part of. So to me, I don't really see it becoming a passive hobby like you maybe suggest. Next up comes a question from Casual1 at Casual Noob Gamer, who asks me, why is Metroid Prime Trilogy for Switch the right answer to what Nintendo will release for Metroid's 35th anniversary? Please elaborate in 1,300 words or more, preferably more. Well, I don't know how many words I'm speaking here, but if you need more than that, I would have to actually make a video on this topic, and, you know, I've done that enough already. The essence of your question, jokes aside, is it's the 35th anniversary of Metroid. If Nintendo celebrates it, the Prime Trilogy is the ideal title, and you're asking me why do I basically think that. And I've discussed it before, even on a recent live stream, I think I mentioned it, and it's just because it's a gimme. It makes it so easy. It's a product and a package of games that already exists for Nintendo. When Nintendo did the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, sure, that was an easy thing for them to do, but they still had to take 3 games, put them together in a package, make them HD, and then sell it and promote it that way. We think they might be doing something similar with Zelda this year, like a Wind Waker and a Twilight Princess. Take those HD games, put them together, and release them as the 35th anniversary celebration. Easy to do. For me, I see the Prime Trilogy as the same thing. When a lot of people want to say that Nintendo doesn't care about Metroid, they're ignoring Metroid fans, they hate the franchise, it's dead and gone, and it's never coming back, I can't believe that, because in the 35th anniversary year, they've already got this easy product that they could just make HD and whatever process they have to do that, and throw it out on the Switch this year, and they can easily just tie it to the 35th anniversary. Does that make sense? Like, all they have to do is say it's a 35th anniversary Prime Trilogy HD release. And so they don't have to create and package this whole 35th anniversary thing and kind of Frankenstein together a bunch of Metroid experiences and just kind of make it a huge marketing push. They can do the bare minimum. Take the games that already exist, make them HD, slap a 35 logo on the front of it, and sell it. It's so easy that it is almost impossible for me to believe Nintendo won't be doing it this year. That's really the essence of the Prime Trilogy thing for me and the 35th anniversary thing for me. Granted, I think maybe other games might be part of it too. If Nintendo goes the extra mile, we could get more Metroid things than just a Prime Trilogy. But if Nintendo goes the laziest simple route, at the bare minimum, they would do the Prime Trilogy with a 35 on the box, sell it for $60, and they're raking in the cash. Next question comes from McDermott's at SOPWAA on Twitter. What's up, man? Says, what's a game you love that's generally considered, quote, bad critically? For you, you say it's Donkey Kong 64. And what's a series that's critically acclaimed that just didn't click for you? And you say for yourself, it's Elder Scrolls and Fallout, which is sad because those are 2 franchises I absolutely love. So I've got some easy answers for this here. As far as the game I love that's considered bad, I actually have two answers. And if you know me, you already know the answers. First one is easy. It's Metroid Other M. I know the game has flaws. I know a lot of people hate it, but I think it's a very good game. It has flaws. I mean, I've said this so many times. It's not perfect. It's not as good as every other Metroid game. It has flaws, and some things they did I think that were not the best. But overall, I think it's a very good, very fun, very interesting, and important Metroid title. I really, really like Metroid Other M. The other one is Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube, which so many people are down on. And it blows my mind because I think that game is absolutely fan-freaking-tastic. Some of the best graphics I'd ever seen at the time. The gameplay is a rip-off of Zelda, but still so fun. I just love that game. And then you talk about a series that is very popular that doesn't click for me. I have some easy ones for that as well. Obviously, Pokemon is a popular series I don't care for. Animal Crossing is a popular series I don't care for. And Final Fantasy technically counts, although I've dabbled in Final Fantasy and had some enjoyment. And I'm always open to Final Fantasy. I'm not really very open to Pokemon or Animal Crossing. There's really nothing there that gets me. Final Fantasy has it within itself to hook me. In fact, I played all the way through Final Fantasy VII Remake and will still play the next one, even though that game frustrated the hell out of me. So technically, the answer is Final Fantasy, but I'm a little bit more open-minded on that one. Next question comes from Essie, current resident on, I don't know what the rest of your name says there, Nintendo Switch? Anyway, Essie, at Secret Nintendo, says, what new feature or game mechanic would you add to Metroid Prime 4 if you could choose? So, I've briefly mentioned this in the past. I've touched on this over the years since Metroid Prime 4 was announced. And I do have an answer for this. If there's something that I'd like them to add, like a new kind of mechanic to the game that I think could be really cool, it would be if there were 2D sections of the gameplay. Now, I don't want the game to be 2D. Metroid Prime and Prime 4 needs to be first person because that's what the series has established. Okay, so I don't want them to change that part. The game needs to be first person. However, I think there is something really cool to the idea that some puzzle sections or just some puzzles or some areas have to temporarily be traversed in a 2D fashion. And the way I think about it is, if you're playing and you're first person and your arm cannon and, you know, Samus is walking and you're in first person and you come up to a section that needs to be 2D, suddenly, similar to with the morph ball, how the camera quickly pans back out and is looking at a third person view of the morph ball, imagine if you're walking to a section and then suddenly the camera pans back out of her head and pans out and just creates a profile side view, and you're seeing a Samus character model and this section that you're going to maybe run and do kind of old classic kind of platforming style, and maybe some actions can only be done in that setting you can't do in first person, and there could be huge sections throughout the game where you have to play that way. I picture it like turning from a first person into like what Metroid Samus Returns look like on the 3DS. That's a 3D character model game. Like the character models, the backgrounds are all 3D polygons. What if the game turned into that temporarily to solve some puzzles, maybe even fight some enemies or beat some bosses? I don't know. It's just an idea, but I think there could be something really cool to it. So I'd love to see that in Metroid Prime 4. All right, coming up to the end here, we got 2 more questions to go. Next question comes from Feral King BLM at Feral King 422, who says, I asked my previous question again, but how would you feel if Metroid Prime 4 or just a new entry in general puts the series in a direction that does well to bring in the numbers and more fans, but isn't exactly what most of the old fans want? Okay, so the question you're saying is, what if Metroid Prime 4 is changed in such a way, basically becomes more casual, I think is what you're getting at, so that it sells like crazy and a lot of newcomers come on board with Metroid, but maybe it doesn't appeal to some of the older classic Metroid fans, maybe like myself or you. Would I be willing to sacrifice the satisfaction of the classic Metroid for a new kind of Metroid for the sake of better sales? And that's a loaded question. It's a very good question. It's very well thought out. How would I feel about that? I mean, in a lot of ways, I think I would feel okay with it, you know? I don't want to feel like a gatekeeper to like, oh, Metroid has to be a certain way, blah, blah, blah. You know, the only thing I'll I'll restate that I've stated before, is I do think Metroid Prime 4 does have to feel like Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3. It has to feel like a proper continuation from those games, because it is. So as long as it stays within that box, as far as any other new weird changes they might add to the game, something that makes it a bit more casual, there would be part of me that would be disappointed. I think some of the more casual elements to Metroid Prime 3 or to Metroid Other M are some of the things that hold those games back just a little bit in my overall list of Metroid titles. But I also think there's something to be said for Nintendo using Metroid Prime 4 to reinvigorate the franchise. Not necessarily reboot, but reinvigorate. I've referred to it in the past as like a possible rebirth of Metroid. So I'm open to some changes, even some things that veer a little bit casual, if it makes the series popular and successful and selling like crazy and recognized by new people. Like, it's important for it to do that. But there's a limit to how open I am to that. Not because I want to be a gatekeeper Metroid fan, but because I do think it's worth it to keep the integrity of the actual classic Metroid experience intact. We can't lose too much. Is there some give for the sake of a more popular franchise? Yes. Even myself, I've got some give with how much casualness I would be okay with in the game. But again, there is a ceiling to that give, so we can't go too far. We can't turn it into something that's unrecognizable as a Metroid experience. It's got to keep some of those core tenets. So, tough question, tough answer, but my quick version of the answer, I think, would be that. Okay, and the last question of the day comes to us from eSolo at Camaro Pharaoh on Twitter. Love that name. And he asks me, given the history of console generations, will Microsoft walk away with this generation, and will Nintendo's next machine be unsuccessful? So, another pretty loaded question. That's a very big question. It's a very good question. It kind of gives you a lot to think about. I think focusing on the first part about Microsoft, it's worth noting just how much Microsoft is currently fighting hard to be a major console leader and a major platform leader, I guess you should say, or a service leader with what they're doing. And hopefully a lot of you guys have been able to kind of notice and see what's going on there. I don't know that I'm yet ready to say that they're going to walk away with this generation, but they are fighting hard, man. They clearly are trying to make the Xbox brand and the Xbox platform, and most importantly, Game Pass, the premier place to be and the premier place to game, right? I mean, look, I like Xbox, and I like the platform and the company and all that, within gaming, I should say. But it's pretty fair to say that they essentially got their asses handed to them last generation by PlayStation, by the PS4. And you know that they don't like that. You know that they're not proud of that major loss that they took when you compare the Xbox One to the PS4 and the way the Xbox One was revealed. I mean, they just had bad press from the jump. Really, nothing ever went their way last generation if you truly look at it. Even the Halo game that they made wasn't very well received. I think Halo 5 is better than a lot of people say, but it's definitely like the least best Halo. Like, it's at the bottom of the list, and a lot of people really just didn't love it. So they just had nothing go their way. This generation, they clearly are putting all of their money and effort and fight into their current business model. So they made the Xbox Series X the absolute most powerful console on the market, the best place to play console games, and they're pushing Game Pass like nobody's business. Whether you're Game Pass on Xbox or Game Pass on PC, they think this is the future. They think they've found where they think gaming will be going in the next 10 years, and they want to be on the forefront of that shift. They want to be the reason that shift even happens with Game Pass. And while we don't really know actual numbers being made by Microsoft and the companies putting their games on Game Pass, I mean, there's some theories and some speculation out there, but I don't think there's any hard data. It does seem to be something that is working. And Microsoft pushing more and more into the Game Pass future, to me, shows that it must be doing well monetarily, right? It has to be at some point, especially for the game devs who allow their games to go on Game Pass, right? They're not selling individual copies on Xbox. It's on Game Pass where people can just download it. So anyway, to lead into the question you say about will they walk away with this generation, I don't know. I tend to think no, because I think that Sony is going to just continually be unstoppable with the PS5. They have way too many good, high-profile, exclusive titles coming. And I know Sony got themselves into some crap in the news recently, but I don't think that's going to hurt their bottom line. They're going to make great games. They're going to sell great games. They have great exclusives, right? Nintendo, obviously the Switch is just an unstoppable beast right now. I think some new hardware is coming in the next year to 2 years, maybe next gen. If they can keep that going, it's also going to be hard for Microsoft to kind of topple Nintendo. So that is kind of in a precarious situation. But what I will say is I think Microsoft is absolutely going to outperform the Xbox One. I think they're going to be successful compared to what they did last generation. And I think for now that's the best you could ask for. And hopefully Microsoft will be happy with that. Now, the Nintendo thing, you ask if Nintendo's next machine will be unsuccessful. Hard to answer, because Nintendo, more than the other guys, has a very rocky history. They go up, they go down. They go up, they go down. They go way up with the Wii. They go way down with the Wii U. As much as I love the Wii U, they went way down with it. Now they're way up again with the Switch. And so maybe you ask this question for this reason. What if they're going to go way down again with the next generation? It's possible. Nintendo is the one always trying weird and different things. They're always surprising us and keeping us on our toes. That means that when they have something work, it works to great degree, and they get insane success like the Wii and the Switch. But when their ideas don't work or don't click, that's when you get your Virtual Boys and your Wii U's, and they have a huge flop. So tough to say, but trying not to be the overly optimistic biased fanboy, I'm kind of leaning in towards no. I don't think their next console will be unsuccessful. I think their next console will be successful. It's part of the reason, the theories that I always lay out to you guys, is that I think they want to carry the Switch's momentum into the next generation device in the next year or two, as opposed to wait for Switch's sales to die, wait for interest in Nintendo and their brand to die, and try to pick it back up or scoop it up from the bottom with something cool. I think instead of letting the Switch go like this and then down and try to save it, because this is a harder thing to overcome, I think it's best to just keep this going and release a great looking device that's very enticing while Switch sales and Nintendo sales are maintaining, record highs. Carry that momentum into the next machine. Sony did it going from PS4 into PS5, and so far that's working out. I think Nintendo should do the same. I think they will do the same, and so for that reason, I don't yet think their next machine will be a flop. And so, with that wraps up this Q&A. Man, does it feel good. It took me way too long to get back to it. I apologize for not being able to answer questions from the last Q&A, but my schedule was just crazy at the time and I didn't get to it. So great to do this one here, back on my resurgence after my temporary break I took for my health there. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. I apologize to those who I didn't answer, but I can only do so many questions per video. Reminder, if you want to be a part of this in the future, subscribe to the channel so you can see the polls and the Q&A questions I put out on the community page, and definitely follow me on Twitter, where I'm always tweeting and talking with you guys about all sorts of gaming stuff and all sorts of random life stuff. So yeah, that's going to be that. Thanks again for everyone for asking questions. This video is a wrap. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.